So from last class, and I just have it open here, so we have an overview of what we did, because we basically talked about the controlled inputs, which is the React controls the values of the input, which what we just talked about, that on change does something, re-updates the value of it every single time it changes. Then we also looked onto fetching data using the fetch, and again in here it says component didn't mount, but we use the use effect for it. We talked a little bit about prop types, which is the component tells what exactly types, what are the types of the props that it needs to work. And we missed this one, which is children. So we have to talk about that one today. And for that, I will maybe zoom in a bit. So I've been saying the word child component, which, for instance, when you looked at Git home, right? You ignore this for now, only look at this once here. The component Git home has 3 components inside of it now, as a header component and repositories and a footer. And those, I've been calling them child components because this one is the parent of this one. So even when you look, maybe I should start. Yeah. So even when we look here in the components, so we have Git home here that has header, repositories, and footers because they are children of them. But there is the concept of children, which is not exactly this child component. And that's basically when you can create a wrapper for your component, which means that there is something that wraps your component into something else. Now, the way to explain that, I created this footer here. Now, this footer is very simple. It's HTML with the stuff inside. And yes. And when we look at here, footer is this entire part down here. I have it at the bottom. So it has this title and then links, and then inside a couple of lists. And now this is completely fine to do, but sometimes you might want to make your components a bit more reusable, or sometimes you don't want to write this, or this might come from somewhere else, like some API or whatever, and you don't want to handle it here. You want to handle it outside of the component. So the same way we can, and I'll remove this because that's exactly what you're going to do. So if we do this title, right, and then title. Now here we can have a title, right, and hey, gets printed down there, right? And this is a prop. This we know already how it works. Now, what if I want to send HTML, right? Because we can send strings, we can send functions. It's true that we can actually send a function component. We can send a function component as a parameter as well. We can do that. But what we can also do is to make it in a normal. Okay, so this, as you know from HTML, if we have div here, this is valid, right? But if we have this, it's also valid. It's an empty div tag, right? So until now, we've been writing our components like this, closing them right away, because they don't have anything inside. They are already something. But we can do the same thing we do with the div, we can do with this. So whatever we write here inside of the footer, so now I'll write a div here. Are we here? Now, when we look at it, we are not there, right? Even though in here I'm sending a div inside of the footer, and I want that div to get printed. And this is where children come. And that's a keyword that exists. And it has to be children. So if we do this, and now let's just kill this one. And this is a div. Yeah. Even though in here we don't write any div, we just say children. So basically what we are saying is whatever the children are, print them at this stage. I deleted this thing, so I will actually cut it and do children here so that we can actually see that. How can I? Yeah, I'll put the footer there so we can see side by side. Sorry. Okay, this needs a bit formatting. So now, as you see, we have exactly the same footer. But the HTML belongs in a parent now. And in here, we are just saying, give me the children.
And if you want to pass a class for the children, is it possible?
No, you have the element here. You can just write whatever class you want.
Like, I mean, like if I want to bind like a variable, or
again, your children is this element. This element can be a React element. So, for instance, here.
So essentially, we can get like a component and turn into an HTML tag and write some more HTML inside of that, which becomes the children.
Yeah. Yeah, and either HTML or JSX, which means you write a component. So, for instance, now here I moved all this content into itself. It's this component, right? So now, if we do this and say footer content, the same. It works fine.
Yeah, but Mark, what's the benefit from that if I can do it inside? What's the use for this case?
Well, the benefit a lot of the times is to have, again, some sort of wrapper that has the same exact functionality, but only the content might change. So you can put the functionality here, and then the content is children. So then you just pass those along. For instance, in our example, the repository one, we could make this a child of it, and remove it from here, and then just say like, oh, I need this data plus this. It's more about like how do you want to organize your components. Again, it's not a thing that you need to do. You don't. It's just a thing that you can do.
Well, what would be let's say the best practice on cases like this?
It depends. It's more about reusability. Like how much do you want to reuse your components? Because again, in here, as you can see, we just moved the whole thing on this side. But imagine that this content, we actually want to use it somewhere else. Exactly like it looks like. Now we have it here. Now, I mean, we can even rename it from footer content to content, right? And now on the header, because we want here.
A good use
No,
case.
what I'm saying is the best.
Like navigation.
The best practice is like when the majority of the people use it in a certain way.
But even the links you can write it inside your component, inside the function. It's not be effective for that.
Yeah, but for instance, right now, the way that we have this here, now of course on the header, okay, this has a lot of stuff, but I'll just put it here. We just need to remember to add it to the props value. So now, for instance, we have the same exact content with HTML. And we can completely reuse it. And if we want to have state on that place, if we want to have a button, instead of doing that on a header and then on a footer, then we just do it here. We can, for instance, click
So you see what he just wrote there, it's sort of like a best practice to use React, like when you use a state, you can use whatever name, or let's say he put a click and set click, so people usually use that, like A, set A, B, set B, that's like a best
Oh yeah,
practice.
the naming, yeah,
Yeah.
Usually, but
Yeah.
it's not a requirement. It's just that
No, it's
that's
not
usually what
requirement,
it
but
happens.
it's what people use, so you like, if someone from like us that don't know what we're doing, we can recognize what that means.
Let me just finish this one. Oh yeah, because now we have a crazy amount of them. No, it's not. It's because of this. Now, I mean, they are very far apart, but we define one function to click with this content here, and it's completely reusable, and it does not touch each other, basically. Now, for instance, the way you build the to-dos was actually exactly the opposite way, right? You started from a list, and then you went all the way down.
Yeah.
This way is the other. It's looking at the other side. You have the unitary one, and then you send it as children. So basically, you can actually look at your application and refactor it the other way around. Now, it's not required. That's the thing. It's not. It's just an opportunity that exists. And sometimes it's very hard to actually like figure out like, oh, I could have used this. Maybe it would be better for this use case. It's just that usually people tend to think about like the big picture to the small one, right? You look at the website and then you break down into components. But in time, you're going to start to do the other thing. You start to look at the unit one and like, oh, I can send this one as child. And then I send on a list, so all the children get printed. So it's a bit of a, I mean, what's the best case? It's hard to say which one is better because it's, again, the outcome is the same. It's as less code as possible. That's what we want to achieve is we want to change this about us, we change it once. That's it. And I think actually in one of the homeworks, what was saying to use as children is basically the style. That's the only thing that they wanted to, which you can argue, but for the style I can use a class. It's exactly, I mean, that we already have that feature, right? But again, it's not that we should always do it like that. No, it's we have the possibility to solve a problem. Again, this is one of them. It's if we want to have a piece of reusable code, we can send in as child of any component, and we have that possibility. So we don't have to live with all like having every single component itself. Like the component can render other components. Yeah. Now, for instance, because oh no, this is actually the other thing. It's the description. Because of course on our header here, I'm printing children, right? But I'm not sending anything. So it just does not get printed. So I can basically send whatever I want. You can do something really crazy where you send other components as childs, and this probably is gonna, yeah, create two sections of what we just did. So as you can see, it's more for code reusability that we can do. Yeah, and that's how children work. Now, one of the big reasons that we need to know how children work is because we're going to use them in one specific case, one very specific case. Yeah, this used in this example. What is this example? Oh yeah, this is just basically, I mean, again, this is a very, how to say, basic example, so basic that you be like, yeah, I don't need to do this to solve this problem, right? But that's the thing, you can, because again, now you can send whatever components you want as child of that one, and they will all get printed, because they will all get rendered as children.
But why we use props.children?
because I mean, yeah, that's another thing. So in here, I'm actually deconstructing the props, right? Because technically, you have this. Nope, sorry, props. So, but if you want to have that, then you need this dot title and props dot children. Otherwise, yeah, that's why. I mean, it's just a shorthand to have more the words than, because this works. It's exactly the same thing. It doesn't change anything. It's just that in here, if you do this, title and children, then in here you don't always need to do props dot something, then you can just use the names that you ask for it up there. So it's
That's not easy.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On like right down where you said you deconstructing the title and the children. Let's say on our earlier example, we use like the to-dos there, and to-dos is like an array of objects. When you use that as a prop, then you have access to all the key values on the array. Is that right? So you can pass any of them down as a prop.
yeah, but for instance, where can I? Okay, in the repository here,
Yeah, the repository.
basically that's what we are doing. We have name, description, star, on delete.
No, what I was saying, yeah, I saw that, but on another, I think it was on another section, you only have the name of the array over there instead of each of them.
Oh yeah, because if you are sending only one object.
But so like let's say to do they have the repos, they have the name, the description and stuff. If you put the name of the array on the top, would you have access to all those props or?
No. No, you cannot do that. For that you have to do props. Props here. I mean, actually you can name it whatever you want. Props in this case. But then of course in here you would have props dot name dot description dot.
Oh, okay.
So it's
okay.
Again, this is just a short. I mean, it might be a little bit confusing, but it's just a way of deconstructing all your inputs basically. It's so that you can have them individually and then just use that as the variable. It makes it a bit shorter also, the code.
No,
Sometimes it might be harder to read because you might not understand exactly what is this, but usually whatever goes there, if it's a component, it's a prop. There's nothing else that you can send. You have to send props. The only big difference, of course, is when it's children, because children can be anything. Can be HTML, can be a function, can be a number, can be anything, because that's what. Again, you are not required to send HTML as children. You can say, hey, here, and then probably, yeah, it got printed there. You can send anything as children. That's one, let's say, problem, because you are printing whatever people are sending to that component. So that's also why, of course, in this case, we should. Damn it! No, I forgot. We should, yeah, this.
prop types.
Yeah, I forgot the name of it. So we need to do footer dot
I know the field.
prop types of it, and we probably need to import it from here, and then you can say children is prop types dot children, because that's also available. So I mean, in this case, actually, we got an error. Typo nuclear children react no
Because
typos.
you hide and,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm just saying if it's a different error, but no, it is. So if we do this, hello. Typo nuclear prop type children react no typos. Do we have a typo? No. Let me just check it here. prop types children type checking. Yeah, okay. If we do element, then we require an element. Yeah. Is it element? Yeah, this way we require an element, but now what if we just send the E? It still does it. So yeah, this might be a bit trickier to actually validate what we are sending. But shouldn't children be there? No, it's not. I actually thought children was prop type.
What kind of validation you trying to get for that children?
No, it would just be that you could not send, for instance, a number or a text, but again, anything can be a children.
Like
That's
a
always.
type, or just a type, so a type of validation. Actually.
That's
But then you can type also script in that.
yes, but it won't get rendered. I mean, you say this. Yeah. So what? I mean, whatever you send, but then of course, this is not a public thing. Nobody can inject scripts on your app. This is just for you to. I'll say for you to make your components more reusable, because this it has to be you doing, or someone else that uses the code base doing this.
Bad intentions.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, if you get HTML or scripts from an API, and then you send them there, that can be a problem. And that you should never do. No matter what, you should write your own scripts. So, but yeah, this.
Copy and paste is not a very good idea.
No. So
Not a winning strategy.
I'll remove this. Oh no, the footer is correct. But the header, where is the header? Header.
So, Marco, if you want to
We don't
make a
need
website or web page, from beginning you should decide if you want to use React or you want to use WordPress or you want to use Bootstrap, whatever.
Yeah, of course. Because React is a tool to build a website. So
You cannot mix these two together.
you can always mix, just more work. The less tools you use, the easier things become. Sometimes the tool cannot solve all your problems, but if you have a very simple website to do, then this is the answer.
Yeah, HTML and CSS knowledge.
Yeah, you can even do a blank, like a complete .html page if it's a very simple website that does not require a lot of maintenance. It's just, again, what React does is that it gives a lot of tools for developers to all work together in one project. Because, for instance, usually, and that's what happens, like you don't build a website from start to end. You build parts of it. So, for instance, I start working on a header and footer, and you can work on a body of it without even, and we are not even talking to each other because I'm using a component called header and a component called footer. And you build a component called content, and then we put all together, and it works. And that cannot happen in other tools. I mean, it can happen in a lot of more tools, but React is, that's also one of the things that it solves, is that it's very modular, it's very, you can do independent work out of each other. That's one of the main goals, of course.
Does Lego use a lot of React on the page? Because many you can see just small little boxes and this and that.
Every single page nowadays almost uses React, so or React or Vue or Angular, and all of them have the same concept of components and as smaller as possible, so that it's easy to change, it's easy to maintain, and it's not duplicated code. One does not step on the other. That's always the mentality that should be behind it. But then of course, if you want a very simple page with 2 links, then React is too much work. Yeah. Because then you make an HTML page for yourself, and you know how to do that. Again, React is something that also makes you think a little bit of because we can write one big component, right? And that's our website right there. It's completely fine. It's just that now you have to change this part or that part. Is it easy to change? Because to build, it's always easy. But now we have to change. Is it easy? If it's not, then it's wrong. Then it should be easy to change. And
Yeah, tell me about it. I still remember the Benjamin told me, oh, you should put the stuff on the list of my admission test. Only takes 10 hours. No, 50 hours.
no, but for instance, as you see in React, it's very easy to build a list now, as long as you have the data for it.
Yeah.
It's very easy. Just map through it and then print a component on it. And you don't need to repeat, for instance, what I did here for the what I did here. Nobody does this anymore. Like, you don't write lists. You have your components writing those lists for you. So that, but again, if it's a small website and you only gonna use this, even if you're gonna use this more than one place, right now we actually can see it's reusable because it's on itself as a component, and then you can send it as a child of other components, and it gets rendered. So it's more about how to organize your code and less about like, I want to do this website. No, it's how can I organize my code to do this website, basically. Okay, now we know how children work, kind of. But now let's see a real example of why we have children. Because again, to have, as we saw in that example, to have children, oh, now I closed it. To have children, just like with a div that basically only sets styles on it, right? That's the only thing that it's doing. That might not be that, let's say, wow to do.
It's not like a groundbreaking experiment.
No, no, because again, we know CSS and we know we can create a class and does exactly the same job. But now we're gonna learn one, it's not a term, but it's a concept, another concept in React, which is context. And context is divided into a consumer and a provider. Now, I mean, when sometimes you say something and people say like, oh, what's the context of that? That's exactly the same meaning here. It's like, it needs to have a context, needs to, like, what is this being used for? Like, what can you put it into context? And that's exactly the same meaning. Now,
the provider is the database, the consumer is the front page.
No. No. The main goal of context is actually to share data across the page. Because we saw state, right? And we saw that having a lot of state everywhere can actually make your page re-render all the time. And that's bad. Because then, just because you clicked here, then the whole thing re-rendered. So it's making like, it's kind of heavy for it.
I have experience with that.
But
one time I tried console look and I see 100.
yeah, because probably it was in an infinite, yeah.
It was crazy.
But again, context does not replace state. It's not a replacement. And it should be used also with careful, because if you have a lot of context, then you lose the context because you don't know why or where and how it's being used. One of the main, actually, if you search both in Hacker Future and in a React website, the main example of context is actually a theme. So having a light theme and a dark theme. So for instance, what I have here, I mean, that's quite easy. We can do that with state as well, right? I mean, state can change a class. That's basically what we are doing. I mean, now I'm not doing it anywhere here, but somewhere we had to do that. Oh, when you click it,
we do it in the very first.
Yeah, it changes like the color or something, right? So that can be done with state. But the thing is, a theme, we want the entire page to update. We don't want a component to update. And we don't want to have a state here on a root, because every time we would change, it would just update the whole website, and we don't want that. We don't want re-render all the time. For instance, I'm using this API from GitHub. Every time I would change theme, it would poke GitHub, like, give me more data. And then I would lose, like GitHub would say like, oh, you reached the limit of data. Like you cannot ask for more. And that's where the provider comes in and the context comes in. Now, how exactly does that work? So, and this one I'm only going to explain on a new React because actually I never done it on the old one. There is a use context, of course, because everything is use something. And when you go to the hooks in React, again, we have the basic ones, and we already talked about use state and use effect. And as you can see, use context is another one. And it's considered the basic because it's used a lot, actually. All the rest, to be honest, I only used one of them other than that, and these ones, I use them a lot. So the way that a theme, for instance, would work is that we need, this is also not, I'll close all these things. It's not really a rule to do exactly what I did here. It's more of organizing your things. And if you go through the React tutorials, they do something similar to what is here. So we need to create a context, and it's as simple as this, react.create context. And that basically it's creating an object, because everything is an object. And it's creating an object that you can use from now on, anywhere, anytime. And I'm exporting this. Now, this is a very simple thing. What's important is that if you have, in here we are using a theme context, but imagine that we would have a language, when you want to change the language of your website. Then that's also a very good use case for context. But we will do theme, and you can imagine that language would be a bit similar. So context equals react.create context. So now basically we have two contexts created here. Now you should not do this in other places of your website. That's also why I created the theme.js, so that you only create it once, because if you create it in more places, then it gets overwritten, and you don't want that. You want your context to be unique. Imagine you want your state to be unique as well, because if other things change your state, then everything goes to hell. So in here, we are exporting this one. And this you can imagine as if it's the consumer, even though we are calling it context, but I'll just write it here. This is to consume. But this theme context actually, can we actually see how it looks like? Theme context. So if we log it, somewhere here. Okay, it's not readable. Oh yeah, it is. We only need to care about these two. So as you saw, our context, I just console log it, and it has a provider and consumer, right? And that's exactly what the context needs. A provider is something that establishes what is the context, and the consumer, it uses the whatever is there. And once we see how things work, might become a bit more clear. Now, the provider, again, it needs to provide data. And in this case, actually, we can already see the data here. Basically, I created a themes object with the light and dark inside. And then both of them have background and have color. And then, I mean, they're basically opposites, right? It's white background, black font color. Another one is black background, white font color. And this is very simple. You can make more attributes for it. So basically, what we want is our provider to provide these options, both options, to our application. And this, again, is where children come handy, because basically we want to wrap the entire application on this provider so that we can access the themes from anywhere. We don't want to import things and blah, 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 blah. We want to be able to not only access light and dark, but also to be able to change the theme. That's even more important, right? Because that's one thing we want to do. So this theme provider is a very simple component that it uses state. And basically, I'm using the theme as state of this component. So I'm setting the light as default, because you have to set some theme as default, right? Every website has a default theme. And I'm like, so this theme gets the theme.light as default, and then I'm creating this set theme function that basically, whenever it gets called, it changes whatever value you give to it. And then I'm doing theme context, which is the context we created here, dot provider, and then I'm sending both theme and set theme, which is both the value and the function to change the value. I'm sending it. And this might be a bit weird because you see this looks like a prop, right, of a component, but this behaves a little bit different because basically it sends both this item and function to all the children. So wherever children are there can actually access both these things. Now, I created, as I said, a theme.js just to make things a bit separate so that I don't have everything in one big file. So if I move them side by side here, how can I, yeah, like this. So when you see here on my Git home, because, I mean, you can argue Git home is not really the root is this index, but I know that index only has Git home, right? Actually, some people actually put their providers here so that you make 100% sure it's on the index. There's nothing before that. But that's, it's up to you. So on my Git home here, I have a theme provider, and then I'm sending the entire application, because before we knew that we had this, right? That's exactly what we had before. Yeah, now it actually says that because I'm using the theme somewhere, and now it misses because the provider is not there anymore. I just delete it from there. So now, okay, this theme provider, as you can see, is this one, and we are passing all the children get treated. Now, how can we use the context in our components? So on this header component here, as I said, there is a use context. And you still, of course, have to import the theme context, the one that we exported here, right? I will comment this out just for noise. And delete this, sorry. So you still need to import it, definitely. But now here, we actually have both theme, and if we want, we have the set theme. But in here, I don't really want to change it yet. I just want to use it. I just want to see how it looks like.
How we reach here?
Yeah. So now in here, if we log.
How we reach here? It's like it was before, like we just passed it in the index or somewhere else.
Yeah, we passed it. Actually, we don't even see that we passed it. Now
we call the function.
We basically call this component.
Yes.
And this component is passing it here as value. But this value is not a prop, is part of the provider. So basically this value says, oh, theme and set theme, put it into context from now on. So anyone can access it. And because we are in header, that is inside of theme provider. So now header, if we do this, and I'm console logging theme here, so when we can see that it's background white and color black, which is the light one. Now, what I'm doing here might be a bit tricky, but I can do it in a different way. So we can say background, because this is just style, right? We know this. So background is theme.background, and color is theme.color. Now we do not really see a difference because that's exactly what's happening here on the header. If we inspect we can see the values here, right? That's exactly the values we are sending there. So if we remove this one, for instance, Okay, now it went away. Yeah, that one is gone. It's just that it kind of, actually the color is different because I think on the CSS I have it gray. So, so we can see that it actually works to change the color.
So this overrides the CSS.
Yeah, the style does because, I mean, it kind of comes within the component. It's like, it's inline styling. So it always overrides CSS if you do inline. Always overrides whatever you wrote.
Would you be able to, let's say, replace some of the CSS with that?
No. No, because that's a complete, like that's on a .css file. You cannot change those. You can set it here, but not change those.
No, not change the CSS. What I'm saying is, like, let's say, instead of styling some of like the H1, just style that with the context instead of styling on the CSS.
Yeah, but I mean, if you do this, this is completely valid to style. It's just that, of course, you'd have to, in here, you have to write all the options you want. And you have to make sure that the names are the same as they are used in CSS. That's why in here we are only using colors, so that those are very easy to control. But for instance, if you have font sizes and all that stuff, I would recommend to use CSS for that thing.
Because then if any of these fails, if JavaScript fails, then you have no fallback for CSS or anything like that.
If JavaScript fails in a React application, you don't have a website. So, no, it's better not to fail. That should not be a problem.
How we can apply everything in all the web page or in all the application with themes?
Yeah, no, we will see that.
Okay.
Because, again, this theme here, we could have it even like as a value, light equals true and dark equals false, and then pass it as part of the class name, and then handle all that logic on CSS. That's also possible. In here, I'm just doing it a bit more verbose so that we can actually see, like, oh, we have theme.background, theme, because we can define as many as we want here. So now, let me just, I have this component here. And as you can see, this header has no state at all right now, right? And then I have this component here, select theme, which I'm going to move to this side so we can see side by side. And now on this select theme, and this might be very tricky to look at, to understand. But basically in here, we are creating a select box. That's what we are seeing up here. Maybe if I show the HTML of how it looks like, it's more easy to understand. So it's just a select box with a value light, value dark, and then light theme, dark theme. To create that, there is a little bit of work, but just because we have to iterate through all the keys and then print them out. But I mean, if you look, this is just JavaScript with a little bit of HTML inside. It might be a bit weird to understand it, but it's only that.
Oh, I tried that one. With it, especially with that object key, and then you have like.
Yeah, but this
parentheses and curly braces get all messed up.
We will go through this function, don't worry. Now I just want to show what we are actually doing with the theme and the context. So in here, we actually used context to get the theme, the actual values. But here, this one, we actually want to change the theme. So basically, I'm getting the set theme that I already showed it. We are like, it's being passed as well, right? We can choose theme and set theme. So, and in here, I'm basically saying like, oh, every time that this select box changes, set theme to whatever value comes from the option. So for instance, now it's light theme, now it's dark theme. And as you can see here on the colors and also visually here, it just changes, right? Mm-hmm. Now, we are not using state. I mean, at the end of the day, we are using state, but not directly. And two components, the select theme and the header, are talking to each other. Now you can say like, oh yeah, but
that's pretty cool.
But this one is a child of the header, so that's why it works. Now we can do something a little bit different of, for instance, in our repositories here. Let's just do exactly the same we did here. So on our repositories in here, I'm using context again and getting the theme. And now all the way up here, I'm gonna do a style again, equals background theme dot background and color theme dot color. And this one is only using the theme. It's not setting anything because again, we are doing this here. That's also why I created in a different component. So we have one place where we can change the theme. Use context is not defined. Oh, because I need to import, of course. And probably I need to import. Oop, what did I do there? From. Seriously? I think it's all the way up there. Components. No, it should be theme. And I want the theme context, right? Yeah, because we're using it here. So now if we inspect our code, for instance, on the H1, on the title there, we have background white, color black. And in here, we have background white, color black. So now if we change theme, it changed everywhere. Again, without actually changing the components itself, just telling basically what's happening here on this set theme is going all the way up to the most parent until it finds the context, the provider, which is this one, and say like, oh, change the theme. So whoever is using it, now you'll get a new value without re-render the component. That's the best part of it. So for instance, what we can see here, okay, how to see that? Let me try to. Does this gets updated? No. Does this gets updated? No. How could I do that? Console log not color. Are we here? Yeah, okay. So no. No, because this deletes itself. Okay, no, this is very impossible to see it, but I mean, the thing I wanted to show is that we are not re-rendering the component, basically, which means that the use effect does not get triggered again, and that's good. Because every time we change state, as you know, the use effect can get changed, so everything can re-render again. And this is where the context is really, really useful, because we can basically change the whole data in the website without actually reloading the entire website. Now,
the data, not sure if that's right what I'm gonna say, but I'll say it anyway. So when you use use context, the data would be some sort of like loaded already in memory, and not like local storage, but almost like local storage, where
the data lives in React here. So for instance, if we define a very long light theme and a very long dark theme and very long context, that can be a problem, because then the application might get slow, because as you can imagine, it needs to basically update every single children, saying like the context just changed, please change it. So again, context should be something for, again, themes is good, languages is perfect, actually, because I mean, we can actually just do a language right now. If you want, that would be a good case as well.
Yeah.
Because it's something that it should be as small as possible. And again, you should not have a lot of contexts, because, for instance, you learned a database, right? And to connect to a database, you probably had to instantiate something saying new connection or start connection.
MySQL.
Yeah, whatever. So a lot of time, and usually you should only connect to the database once, right? You should not connect a lot of times, because that pokes the server every single time. So the connection to the database could be something being passed in context. So then every component that actually needs to connect already has the connection there, so you don't need to reconnect again. So you basically instantiate it once only, without doing it all the time. That's something that people do sometimes as well. Again, it's not a requirement because, as you know, like you can create a function that does that and then call that function. The problem is that if the function has new connection, every time you call it, it creates new connection, and that might be bad for your website because it creates a connection every single time. If 30 components do that, you create 30 connections in one page load, and that's bad. So context a lot of times is used for that, but again, the most used case I've seen is language, actually, to change language, and of course themes. So I mean, we can very easily, I can try to create one for a language. So now, of course, we need to okay, I'll create a different file because this file is called theme. So here we will say language.js. And I will just copy this whole thing, paste, and say languages. Oh, yen. PA, maybe, we don't know. Title or greeting. Of course, you should, if you are doing context, you should always use the same keys of what you want to change. So for instance, in here, as we had background, and then in here also background, and then in here color. So for instance, if we say text color, now of course this won't work because now the dark theme does not have the value color. So whenever we now change, the color did not change because we were using it as color in the children, right? Down here, where was it? Somewhere down here. Now this only exists for the light one. So whatever is inside of your context should all be the same so that it matches. So otherwise you're gonna lose context, literally. So for instance, if you do languages, basically you need to create all the placeholders for your language data. So if you have a title, then you need to have a title for English, a title for Danish, a title for whatever language you have.
Can you use like language libraries for that?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, there is React packages with language stuff that handles everything for you.
Okay.
Except the languages, of course, you need to handle that yourself. But there is a lot of configuration to set those up. Again, if you have a very small application, it's easier to do it yourself than to use the tool that someone else did, because the tool that someone else did, maybe it's to solve a problem that you won't have. So if you do it yourself, if it's for something similar, it's for something simple, is actually better if you do it yourself.
For example, for Facebook, you need to translate a lot of things inside.
And then they use language libraries.
I mean, that's handled in a complete different way. That like they have a whole team of translation. Like we have a whole team of translations, translating things for us, and then gets passed as data in an API. But then we still send it as context, so that you can change it at any time, without reload. Every time I see a website that whenever you change language, it reloads the website. That's honestly terrible because you don't need that. You can actually update your entire application if you're using the right tools. You can update your entire application with the language if it's passed as context. Of course, if it's not, if it's only an API that comes and then the website needs to reload if you change to English, then that's, I would say, not the best, but a lot of websites do it like that. So so in here, I'm gonna have lang and set lang, and I'm gonna have languages.en as default. So of course, we always need to remember to change all of them. lang and set. Blank.
Lego is like, their website, I mean, I know the website is global, but let's say, do they have like local shopping carts, like, lego.dk, lego.co.uk?
No, usually, I mean, that's that's a really bad way to work because you need to build a website for all those different places. You should build one website that has all the languages. It's way easier to do. That's not the best way to do, to have different websites. No, that's really bad.
my question, for example, if I want to make TV, like a good example where you can handle it yourself, and I want to make it in two languages, English and Danish.
Mhm.
I should write entire the language or entire the CV here in the theme.
I would say so, yeah. Not on a theme, but on a language object.
Like, for example, all these things or something like that, but inside the context, I should write it here.
Yes. Yeah, because again, you just need to think of how you want to write it as well. That's one of the big important things, is also how do we want to divide, for instance, this, let's say, welcome to GitHome. GitHome does not need to be translated, right?
No.
But welcome to needs to, right? So do you want to have the whole welcome to GitHome here, or do you only want to have one and then make all the logic on a component? Again, that always depends on the use case of what you want to do. For instance, if you're building a CV that you want different languages, of course, things like email and phone number, they don't change language in any place, right? But other things, then yeah, I would put it as part of a big object here with all the possible variations of the words that actually change. The words that do not change, then we don't need to change it with context at all.
So it should be.
Okay, now I have another question then. Let's say you have greeting and greeting over there. Now,
Mhm.
if you have like a subtitle that doesn't need to be translated,
Mhm.
right? Let's say you have the subtitle in English. Do you also need, if it doesn't need to be translated, then you just don't even put it on the object, right?
No, you leave it on your component.
You just leave it out.
Yeah, that's, again, this is just a helping function. It's not a requirement that all your text needs to live here. No, it's what you want. It's the same thing for our theme. We don't want to change our font style. We just want to change the colors. So we only defined the colors, right? Otherwise, you'd have to define the entire CSS library here, right? That would be insane. You wouldn't have a JavaScript file length enough for that. So now we have our languages. I will just copy paste this one so that we have our select theme and select languages the same. Oh, actually, I will do.
So to create this select box, you just make it like map inside it. You make a mapping function.
Yeah, we will talk about the select box after.
Okay.
Now that, let's just try to see how we would have two contexts instead of only one. So this would be the language context, right? Now here I'm gonna do something a bit crazy, but it's okay. Languages. Now theme key, this doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Now this is set lang. And this is languages. Does this work? Set lang of undefined, set lang of undefined. Oh yeah, okay. It should give that error. So now, basically what we need, and this is when things can start to get a bit ugly if you have a lot of contexts, is that you always need to, as I mentioned, wrap your entire application in contexts. So for instance, now we have two contexts. We have a theme and a language. So we need to wrap I mean, the order here does not matter because they both have context. I mean, and they do not depend on each other. They don't talk with each other. So, but the more contexts you have, you can imagine that you have a lot of providers here, and then your code looks. I've seen that type of code. People do it, but yeah. So now here we have the theme that changed. Now, I mean, in here we are changing the language, but nothing is happening because we're actually not using it anywhere. So if we go to the header, do we have space here? It's very populated, but yeah, let's do. Because of course now we need to consume that context. So language context right there, and now ang. And now we'll put a P here, and what the heck? What did I call it? Rating, right? Yeah. Okay, so it defaults to English, and now if we change, it changed to Danish. And our page did not have to reload or anything, so it just changed and nothing else updated. And of course, the same thing here. We can change, they are completely independent of each other. We can change them back and forth because they are context. Now, of course, we can, where is it? Language. Greetings and bye. That's an easy one. So now if we do this, everything changed. Now, of course, we are using it all the way up here. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should put it somewhere. I'm going to go to the footer, right? So it's a place where we don't have context yet. And now here we will put, oh, what did I do there? Lang dot by use context of, oh yeah, I need to import it. So now we have goodbye here, we have hello here. If we change the language, it changed both here, and we can change the theme and they stay, and yeah, you know the rest. Now, of course, that we need to, actually, I'm curious to see how that responds here. I'm gonna try something that I don't know if it's gonna work. No? Oh, it's because of that. Yeah. Oh, no, I need the equal. But now I need, don't I need that? I think I do. Oh, I need to import them. Cannot read that. Yeah, it's because I'm trying to use it at the same place that I'm wrapping it. So in this case, we can actually do something, which would be remove the theme provider from here, and bear with me. Now we do not have theme provider, but now we're going to put it on our index all the way up there. So this might look not so pretty, but we just want it to work. Can we just to put it a bit more pretty here and here, and probably we need to import not the context but the provider. Okay, we don't have an error. This one still works. Now this one applied to the whole thing, except the footer, because the footer is actually using something else. What if we actually remove this guy? Oh, then it looks terrible, right? Yeah. Yeah, but the theme works. Now I removed the CSS basically, because I have a lot of CSS rules that can overwrite and re-overwrite things. So what we did here, and I will try to open them side by side. So, so because in here, I'm trying to use the context right here. And before we had a provider here as well. So the provider actually did not get loaded because, as you know, things go from top to bottom, and we were trying to use context of of theme. We were trying to use context of theme, but we have not defined it. We were only defining it 2 lines down. So basically, I changed it to the parent, which is the index.js, and now I'm sending the provider there, so I know that now it's here. So as you can imagine, to clean up a bit the code, we can actually do the same with the language. Just move everything to the index so that it lives on its own bubble, let's say.
But anyway, you should call it inside the Git home, like you do with the theme context. Like const theme, you should call it here, the language. If I want to move the language to outside.
Yeah, it's just because we are not using it anywhere here. The language, in this case, we are not using. We are what's it called? The consumer. We are not consuming anything from language here yet. So that's why it's okay to be here. But again, just for safe, let's put it outside. Let me just do this. Okay, I will context equals. I probably need a return, right? Probably. So here I'm gonna put language. I'm gonna put all this stuff. Why it gets formatted so ugly? Now here I'm just gonna send in that one I just created called context, which again, this is completely legal what we're doing. What? I don't get the format. I'm gonna put this back, whatever. Looks prettier. So, and this still works with no problem. Still updates with no problem. And I mean, basically here what I did is that before we were sending the Git home as in a React render, but now because we have a lot of context and noise around, I basically created a component that does that, basically. So there is no magic around this. And now we can actually use our language context. Language context. Now here, lang, I think. And where do we have our language? Now lang.sup. Now that one gets printed all the way down here. So if we change to Danish, it got updated. And we are using them here. But for instance, as you can see on a footer, we are not really using theme because for some reason we don't want. The same thing with the language. We should only use context wherever we actually need, and we can use it as many times as we want. We can use it in every single component. It's completely okay. If your component needs something that is in the context of language, then you just do this in every component. It's not a problem to repeat this line of code so that you have access to all this data here, basically. So this is probably, I would say, the most used cases of context would be for language and for theme. Again, there is a lot of them, for instance, for connect to databases and things like that, but that's something you usually don't need from the beginning. This one is something that you might need from the beginning if you want to do 2 languages. Then you should start from here. Create a context, and start creating as you need. You also don't need to define every single thing at once, because if you don't know if you're going to use it, right? So just create the base for it, which should be English, Danish, whatever language, and 1 or 2 words, just so that you can actually see it works. Try it out. If it works, fine. Then build your website, build your components, and every time you need the language, you just need to import the language context and use context, and then you have all the access here. That's basically it. Now, I'm going to try to explain what's happening here. Because, again, this is tricky, might be tricky. So this is just, I'll show it in a code, is just to create both the select for theme and the select for languages, right? And they are exactly the same. It's just, I mean, this one actually says theme key. Let's change that, might be confusing. Lang key, lang key, lang key. Right. Okay, so if we look at one or the other, they are the same. The logic behind it. It's just that one uses languages, the other one uses themes, one uses set theme, the other one uses set lang. Now, if we look here, we have a languages object that has English or EN, and then an object, DA, and then an object. And basically, we want to make a map. We want to loop through the object. Mm-hmm. And an object is not an array, right? So we cannot really loop through it. So that's basically what we are doing here. That's what this does. We are saying like, oh, the object, give me the keys, and then we need to send in the object. So then we can loop through every key of that object. So whenever we say map, now here we actually have this one and not this, because we actually don't care about this. We only want to show EN or DA as a selection. We don't want to show the greetings by, so we don't want that. So basically we are looping through the keys, and that's the value we get here on this lang key. This key is basically the index. It's 0, 1, 2, 3. It's just the name key could be called index. It's just that we send it, as we know, we always need to send the key for each child in React. And then, again, we have a select, and a select creates a dropdown automatically, but the select needs options. So basically, we are looping through all the keys, and then creating an option with a value that comes there. One is EN, the next one is DA. And then here is just to show to the user exactly what's the value, basically. And as you can see here, we were doing the same for the theme. So we had light and dark. So in here we are combining data that comes from there, like light, theme, dark, theme. That's basically what we were doing here. So this creates the options. Now on the select, as we learned on previous class, we need to control all the inputs. And select is, I mean, you cannot input, but you can change it. So basically, of course, we need to use onChange, as also we know. And then every onChange has an event. So the event, and that's basically what we're doing here, this E is an event. E.target.value, it's whatever value is here, right? Whatever value you select gets there. Now, languages, where does languages come from? It comes from there, which is this entire thing, right? And if you want all the values of en, you can say languages, curly brackets, en, right? You can do something like this. Log languages. No, not this one. This gives us all that object inside there. So if we go to the console, yeah, hello, whatever. If we say DA, it gives us the Danish ones. So, and this value, because every time we change, then the value comes from the option, which is from there. And as we know, we are mapping through the keys, so it's either en or DA, cannot be anything else. So there is no space for failure here, because we are asking for the value of the same object we are looping through. So there is no way to select a language that is not defined there. This just makes it very, very safe. Because another way to do it would be if else, you know, if en is selected, then you can select it. And that would be insane if you have even 2 languages. It would be already insane. So this it just makes it a very safe way. Like, I mean, if we have another language there, we don't need to update anything else, basically. So
For some reason, you need the also the both the key and the pair. So then instead of object keys, we would use object values.
yeah, but in here we don't care about the values.
Yeah.
So now just by adding a new object here, I did not change anything else. Everything else got updated as expected, and it appears here. And again, there is no space for failing. Like there is no other option I can choose. I need to define them all here. So the same goes for the theme. If for some reason we have another theme, we can do background or green. This should probably work, and it just works. Again, to use languages or themes or anything that you can think could be a context, always do okay, not this, but start from here, create everything in one file that represents actually what you're trying to do, either languages or themes or whatever, and define 1 or 2, see how it works, implement on a easy select one. And again, this might not look easy, but once you've done it, you know it won't fail. Like there is no space for failing because there isn't. So, and then you just can go crazy and add more themes, more languages, more whatever. And you don't need to update your application everywhere where you need to have, oh, now I need this language, I need to change this, I need to change that. Nope, you just need to, of course, if you want more values here, then you need to use them on your places, but that's part of it. And yeah, that's how context works. And again, it's very, very powerful because we could basically translate this whole thing and it would be insanely fast. Just like you don't even, sometimes it might be too fast that you don't even see it changing, right? You see it because the words change, but yeah, this would be a way to completely translate your website, make a nice theme for it, change it back, whatever. I'm gonna do just one more example. How can I do that? Here, Git home app. No, dark. here. No. Font. Come on. Now on the theme, we can say font true. Oh, false. True. Now here. No. So we have app, and then we have lang dot font. Otherwise, nothing. Right, this is valid, should be. Let's do a dash here, it looks better. So now if we do this, did it change? No, it did not change. Why didn't it change? App. Okay, this should have changed. Oh, it's not line, it's theme. That's why. Yeah, okay. So now in here, so basically I have this app class that has the basic stuff, and I created another one exactly the same, just with a different property, font size 40, and I call it app-font. So that's the only thing I did there. Then on my theme, I created the font value on my object that says false, false, and then true on a crazy one. So now here, so basically here on my main app, where I have my app class, I'm checking, is font true? If so, add dash font, which makes it so that it gets that class I defined there. If not, don't add anything. So by doing that, whenever I now change theme, as you can see, the font changed completely. And I'm not doing even in style. I'm actually using CSS for that. I mean, not directly, but because in here I'm loading this class, right? So I mean, if we change the class back, now it's normal. But so as you can see, the theme doesn't necessarily need to live here as objects. That's also what I mentioned, that you can use even, I mean, not two different files probably you can, but you can define all the classes, one for dark, one for light, one for whatever, but then you just need to figure out a way to trigger those. So, I mean, and you can call whatever you want here. It doesn't have to be font, it can be any value that then you can load the dark or light or green or blue or whatever. So you have these two options and they do exactly the same. They are not, just that in this one, we can see the values. We have theme.color, theme.whatever. And in here, of course, you need to see your CSS file and see, do I have this class, do I have this class? And, but again, we can use any of them. So it's not, dependent to each other. So let me just go back to what's the plan here. Then we have render props, and render props is also a big thing. Are there any questions about context? Nope.
It's all clear.
It's all very clear. It makes sense. It's context, right?
just like Node, it doesn't seem very difficult in the beginning. But then when you try to do it, how do you do that again?
It's again, it's very easy to also have some errors because there is a lot of things you need to do here, then you need to do there, then you need to do there, then you need to do there. So it won't work from the beginning. I mean, that's nobody can do that unless you are not running the website and you know exactly what to write. That's impossible to do because again, if sometimes it happens that your application is not even using the provider. So like, and when you see the error here, like cannot read property theme of undefined, it's not that easy to understand what do I have to do to solve this.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if you are using that context, you always need to think, am I providing that context? Does my application anywhere is providing the context? Because if you get an error that you're using, and you can see there, you have a theme of undefined, and you can see theme comes from use context. So I'm using context. Am I providing it to it? And if you get usually this error, means that no, you're not providing to it, so please figure out how to. And by that means you have to have a provider. Again, a provider does not have to be written like I have it here, but this makes it so that everything lives in one file and you don't. If you use this type of how to say, schema, syntax, yeah. If it doesn't make sense for you, use another. But if this makes sense, again, as you saw, in order for me to create the language, I just copied the theme and then replaced a theme into language, and it just worked. So if you want to do it, just copy this whole thing, try it out, and then change word by word and see like, oh, if I change this, now this works. If I change that, now that works. Okay, so let's maybe do a break.